Sox in the basement.
All off-season Sox in the Basement is doing the $1,000 guest bounty, brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park at 33rd and Princeton, with the incredible award-winning menu of burgers and ballpark favorites and the indoor-outdoor seating, and they're around even in the off-season. But during the season, you enjoy them pregame, postgame, and in-game, and a great neighborhood bar in the off-season. And don't forget about the location over at 106th and Western. See everything they're about at corkandcarry.com. And we already had Don Cooper on last week. I saw a suggestion today on Twitter. There's a guy trying to get Jim Cornette, wrestling icon.
Oh, Jim Cornette. Oh, my gosh.
To come on Sox in the Basement.
That'd be interesting.
And I retweeted it. I was like, this would be a good get. This would be really interesting. And we have a few other ones that are in the hopper right now. And I think it's going to be a really fun off season. I wait until they're set. They're locked in. This is delicate at times to try to get on people onto a podcast. I mean, doing this from my basement. We've been doing it that way for 8 years. Sometimes people are a little like, I don't know. I mean, do I really want to go on here? What's this guy going to ask me? Does he know what he's doing? And then they find out that we do know what we're doing, which is why Don Cooper was like, I want to come back someday. So if you want to be a part of this, if you want to try to win $1,000, help us link up with any guest from anything this off season. And if the listeners say it's the best one in a poll that we will put out during spring training, you will win $1,000 if you're the best one, brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park. My friend, are you watching the playoffs?
I have been paying attention to the playoffs for a change.
Are you surprised by the meltdown of George Kirby for the Mariners and then Luis Castillo? Like, I felt like when they got to those two guys in game 3 and 4, they would at least win one of them at home over the Blue Jays. I thought the Blue Jays were in trouble against the Mariners. And now it's like, they gotta hope that number one guy in the rotation, when they get back around here now, they gotta hope that they get the performances they got in game 1 and 2 now in games 5 and 6, because the Mariners had everything going for them, and now it's back to a tied series.
Yeah, it's a little shocking, but then again, not shocking as well, because the Blue Jays are a team that I feel like flew under the radar the entire season. People forgot how good they were. Like, all the attention goes to Aaron Judge and the Yankees and will they make it and will they do this, and the Red Sox, and Toronto just sort of snuck in there and was like, no, we're kind of the best, and the Mariners were another team that was like that. So when I thought that the Blue Jays were in trouble, I also had a feeling like this is going to be a more interesting series. It's not the Dodgers Brewers, where that one was over before pitch 1. I never gave Milwaukee a chance. I never, all the Cubs fans that are flying the triple L flags now from the Brewers losing. I'm right there with them, but I was also like, yeah, but this, you could have made these memes before the series even started. We just knew that one was going to go that way.
The Dodgers, and I brought it up, the Dodgers for this season, Spotrac says that they have paid in total payroll allocations $350 million, more than anybody else in baseball. The Mets were right behind them. I know USA Today had the Mets as number one in a recent article in the last couple of days, but what Spotrac does is it says what was actually spent, not like what was signed at the beginning of the year. It's like, what did they actually spend and what did they spend it on? I mean, the funniest thing on the Spotrac thing for this past season is that the White Sox had $78.8 million allocated in total. 17.5 was paid to guys when they were actually on the 26-man roster and not injured, and 41.8 million was paid to guys while they were injured and not available to play. Which every time I say it out loud,
wonderful way to do business there.
Every time I say it out loud, I go, anybody that wants to tell me this guy's a good businessman, just keep it coming. Jerry Reinsdorf's a great. Oh, he's just so good at this. No, he isn't. He's not good at this at all. Even when he's trying to be cheap, he can't do it properly. The Dodgers, though, $350 million in total payroll allocations compared to the Brewers that are just under, if you double the Brewers, you'd almost have to triple the Brewers to get to it. It's insane. Yeah. They're 22nd with $121.6 million.
And money doesn't automatically mean World Series victory.
But you can't tell me. I mean, a team filled with veterans and guys that go through an organization that is an absolute juggernaut or organization for the last decade or more in the Los Angeles Dodgers. A team that it didn't matter they were the 3 seed. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that the Padres were close to them. It didn't matter that they had to play in the first round. Okay, they were going to win that first round without a problem. Then the Phillies get them, and the Phillies probably were feeling really good about themselves. But nope, you're not the Dodgers. And now the Dodgers are going to beat up on the Brewers. I thought the Brewers might be able to get one at this point in the first 3 games. They didn't get any of them. This thing is over. They're going to go on to the World Series. And, I think at this point, I think the only thing that really defeats them is a team like the Blue Jays. I really like the Mariners and what they're doing. But if their pitchers are going to give up that many runs to the Blue Jays, they're going to get beat up in the World Series if they're able to get past the Blue Jays. Something's not right here at the very end for the Mariners. They're losing their mojo. And I think that I think the Blue Jays are probably the best chance of defeating the Dodgers.
Yeah, I really do. I appreciate how the Mariners went about their business, and I like that team. I don't have any problem with the Blue Jays, but I also like some of the things that the Blue Jays did. They snuck in and they traded for a guy like Shane Bieber, who was coming back off of surgery, was a risk, frankly, and one that's paid off nicely for them. He pitched well in his start against the Mariners, and it's one of those where you look at what they are as a team and how they've built it up, and it's not necessarily a team that is all superstars, but they have a couple of guys in there. Vladdy obviously is he is everything as he's advertised, and George Springer has been there, and George Springer is a guy that probably brings a lot to that locker room, sitting there going, okay, I've done this. I don't necessarily need a garbage can, but if you happen to have one handy, that's fine.
All the guys that got away after the Houston thing, they've done a very good job of it. It's been forgotten, that they were a part of it as well. Because George Springer is kind of getting a revival on social media. He's this gritty, veteran who gets pissed off at the umpires. His team's playing really well. But to illustrate my point that I was making earlier, I think Toronto's got such a better chance against the Dodgers because the Mariners have a $164 million payroll and the Blue Jays have $255. The Blue Jays are in 5th behind the Dodgers, who are at 1st. It's at least manageable. They're built differently. They don't even have Bo Bichette, and they're doing this. Wouldn't it be amazing if he came back? Because they keep saying he's trying to get there. He's close, and he's a major cog in their lineup. So I really believe, as we're looking at this thing, I truly believe, obviously, the Dodgers are going to move on, and I think Toronto ends up getting through this thing. And it's a shame because I was kind of pulling for the Mariners because of their history. And I thought it was amazing what they got from Cal Raleigh. And I think that was kind of like my sleeper pick. And Scott Merkin was on this show about a week or so ago, and he said the same thing. That was kind of his pick, that he thought that they could do it. He's covering the postseason for MLB.com, and he was really excited about postseason baseball. I just don't think that they have the magic. I think what happened in game 3 and 4 tell me it's not their year. Because teams that have magic enough to win and do the entire thing, they don't get blown out. They're getting blown out right now. Their starting pitchers are having a hard time the last couple of games. I don't think that it's going to work out for them. I want to talk real quick about a starting pitcher though that got me on a White Sox kind of question I want to ask you today. Tarek Skubal wants a lot of money from the Tigers. He's got Scott Boras, of course, as his agent, which tells me you don't hire Scott Boras unless you want top dollar. You don't hire Scott Boras as a pitcher, as a player, as anybody in professional baseball, unless your mentality is, I want the money and I don't care where I play. I want the money. I want to max out. I want the money. I want the money. I want the money. That's just what you don't hire him unless that's what you want. There's no hometown discount with Scott Boras. And reportedly, they're $250 million apart. The Tigers and Skubal. And he's only got 1 year of arbitration. He made $10 million last year in arbitration, so that's going to go up. And all he has to do is go out there and not push too hard, but push hard enough that he's going to go get that money from somebody. And they're already talking like the Tigers may have to turn around and trade him now. And they're going to look desperate trying to move him. Some team's going to try to fleece him. That's going to be a very difficult move because the moment they signal that they're not going to pay that kind of money, and they're not, I just don't think that they are. The moment they signal that, teams are going to sit there and say, well, I got this prospect and this prospect. Well, we want this. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who else is really interested in taking on this guy and his really high demands? And that's why the rich always get richer in Major League Baseball. And the thing that I wanted to ask you is, does this make you feel better that at least Chris Getz understands his owner is cheap and would never, ever consider this? That he was able to move a Garrett Crochet for pieces in which all three of them may work out and be contributing Major League Baseball players, with Kyle Teal and Brady Montgomery's arrow pointing up higher than Chase Maedroth's. But all three of those guys look like they're great pieces. Crochet's going to be good, but Reinsdorf would have never have given him the deal that Garrett Crochet was going to command when his arbitration ran out. And so to be able to make that move and then understand you have to develop young pitching yourself that can top out as an ace or a number two, that you can have that's controllable for 5-6 years before you have to turn around and move on from that person, and then just get an awful lot of pieces that can be a 3, 4, and 5, and go out and find that reclamation project that you throw into the 5-man rotation like they have for the last couple of years. If you can go and do things like that, it's a better plan with an owner like Jerry Reinsdorf, who's going to do the same thing the Tigers are about to do. Let go of one of the best pitchers in baseball because of money.
Well, and yes, it does make me feel better about the Crochet trade, because the Tigers are in a no-win scenario here. They are a playoff team, and they will go into next season, barring a massive sell-off, they will go into next season with the assumption that they can return as a playoff team, that they will contend for the AL Central and can contend for a wild card. They did have that collapse at the end, which was, pretty spectacular way to deflate your season. But if they trade Skubal this offseason, they're really signaling that they're not going to compete next year. And they've got, a guy like Jack Flaherty has got an option that, not that he's as great as he used to be, but you don't necessarily want him to walk away because he sees that this team is going down. Because now your ownership and the fans are going to look at this and go, well, that's it. We get into the playoff by the skin of our teeth because A.J. Hinch can't keep the team together down the stretch. And now you're trading our best pitcher. You're going to probably have to let another guy walk away. And we're going to go back to being middle of the pack. We're going to be fighting for the Royals and Twins to not, be worse than the White Sox next year. Because that's how all the teams in the Central are thinking. And yeah, it's all about timing. So if you're Detroit, you have to think about not trading him this offseason, trying to get one more run out of him since he's got the 1 year left of arbitration, and then understand that he's going to walk away and not get anything for him, but take your chances of the playoffs. Or you trade him, but you got to trade him for guys that are going to compete and contribute right away, and no one's going to give you a pitcher who's major league ready to turn into an ace to replace this guy, because that's just not how it works. And if you are the White Sox, Chris Getz trading Garrett Crochet, knowing that this team had nothing going for it at the time, and getting pieces, and you mentioned all three of those guys. I'm not entirely convinced Wickelman Gonzalez is completely useless at this point either. So you have to watch where the timing is. What is going to be interesting for Getz is what happens when, let's say it's Shane Smith, okay? What happens when you are in a competitive window, you are a competitive team, and Shane Smith has hired Scott Boras and is about to become extremely expensive, but he's an anchor in your rotation, hopefully, and you're looking at it going, what do I do with him? Where do I go? Do I let him walk and take our chances that we're going to win something with him? Or do I trade him and hope that one of the other guys steps up and takes his place as the ace of the team? That's going to be interesting to see where Getz is, and maybe hopefully by the time the White Sox are there and really facing it down with this young team where guys are going to get expensive, they've got Justin Ishbia money to actually help hold on to key players so they don't have to play this game. Because again, there should be a vast difference between what Detroit can afford and what a team out of Chicago can afford. And we shouldn't be playing this game, but it is. This was confirmation though that Chris Getz made the right move, in spite of the fact that everybody, I'm sure, would love to see Garrett Crochet still rocking a White Sox uniform and being one of the best pitchers in baseball on the South Side, as opposed to in Fenway.
For exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. You go visit them. They're not going to show up and barge into your home. And that way you're not looking at an example window or a picture in a book. You're seeing everything right there, full size, with an owner in the showroom and then one on site. Look, when you're making a purchase like windows or like you're replacing a front door, you really want to know what it's going to look like. And you don't want to be taking the word of a sales guy that's working on commission. You want to talk to the boss and the guy that's been doing it this way for 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985 with their own installers, which they don't farm out the work. It's all their own guys, all major brands, custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. You make a very interesting point there, Ed, and I think that not only the Scooble details that I was reading this morning, but the question I was asked. I was just on another White Sox podcast, Locked on Sox. They invited me on as a guest. This I think I was out on Friday's episode for them, and it was there were only like 3-4 questions that I was asked. The format of that show was a little bit different. And one of them I was asked was, we got on the Crochet trade. And so I just talked about this. And what struck me is that some people don't understand the trade or are angry about the trade. And look, I would have loved to have kept Garrett Crochet. I really would have. And I think I expressed that plenty of times on this show. But that was the right move. Because if you're Chris Getz, and you got to here's the thing. I never liked Kenny Williams. Even after he won the World Series, I feel like Kenny Williams did it in spite of himself. I brought this up before. I don't want to hang on it for too much, but just to kind of illustrate this. Like, this is a guy who traded Aaron Rowan for Ken Griffey Jr., and Ken Griffey Jr. rejected it in 2005 at the trade deadline because he had the ability to back out of the thing. And it might have upset everything that was going on in that clubhouse at the time. That don't stop believing story may not happen. And all the stuff that had gelled with the team, he was messing with it too much. You're definitely not going 11-1 through there, and some of that stuff might not have worked out the way that you wanted to. He didn't want to sign Tadahito Iguchi. People were yelling at him at Sox Fest. His plan was to go with Willie Harris at second base. If he doesn't have Bobby Jenks come out of nowhere, and nobody expected that, Shingo Takatsu was going to be your guy, and Dustin Hermanson and his bad back backing it up. And I can go on with the list of things. Does he get some credit because he was a GM? Sure, he gets some credit. But the guy who said, "Oh, I could just spot superstars by looking at them," that's something he's actually said out loud. Explain to me why you were never able to do it again, or even come close to it again. And it wasn't always payroll, because Jerry gave you more money than what he's giving Chris Getz right now, and you didn't do enough with it. You failed. Multiple rebuilds. You failed. You and Rick Hahn failed. So I understand people saying, I don't trust the GM and I don't trust the front office. But Chris Getz has yet to prove to me he doesn't know what he's doing. He was never the guy I wanted, but he surrounded himself with smart individuals. He's brought in Brian Bannister, which I think is a positive. He's brought in Ryan Fuller, which I think we've already seen in year one as a positive. He's brought in guys from other organizations who look at things differently, and he surrounded himself with that. He's looked at his cheap owner and he said, you know what? If we're not going to spend money on players, I'm going to spend it on new facilities down in Latin America. I'm going to change the entire international scouting and drafting department. I'm going to change how we evaluate things. I'm going to hire different staff that does the little things, because that's the thing I can make an impact on right now. And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to trade Garrett Crochet, because this guy here is never going to pay him. And there's no way I'm going to get a team together that can win anything while I have control over Garrett Crochet. And what he's done is he not only made the trade, but unlike Rick Hahn, he went out and made the trade to get some really good pieces back that I think are going to be very good players for you for a while. He's not been perfect on all of his trades. Trust me, he's made some mistakes, but he's done a very good job with that move. And that was the one he could not screw up. And now you look at it, you're talking about like, okay, what happens when some of these players have Scott Boras as their agent? Some of these pitchers are going to say, I'm going for the money, and are you going to pay for it? Well, first of all, the window's huge. Basically, this whole team is pre-arbitration, not even arbitration at this point. You've got 4 to 6 years with all these guys. I mean, you've got a big window of control here with this team. And the guys that you're looking to be your top end rotation guys haven't even arrived yet to start their clock. So he's doing very well with that. But also, Now you're Chris Getz and you look at this deal where Ishbia is going to eventually get the team. And Jerry is going to eventually die. He's not living forever. He's old. And he's already set up his exit strategy, whether it's through death or if he decides that it's the perfect time to get the most profit and move on from this team. And you look at the Ishbias and you go, okay, I have a big window to be competitive, and maybe, just maybe, and there's probably a better than 50-50 chance, I'll have a different owner when it's time to actually pay these guys down the road. That's how he set it up at this point. And I can't ask for more, at least in that regard, from my GM.
No, the problems, you hit it on the head. The problems with Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams were, Kenny in particular, my big beef with him was always he wanted the superstar. And he and Rick Hahn anointed guys as superstars. That's part of the reason why we had the discussion about Andrew Vaughn being the ex-girlfriend who, goes and gets into the gym and actually takes care of herself after the breakup. Because
I keep thinking to myself, I made that analogy, and one of the two actual exes that I have in my life, they're trying to figure out if I'm talking about them, and they should just calm down about it because it's just the perfect analogy for anybody that has an ex. Honestly, it's not a shot. It's not a shot. It was funny when I came up with it, but it keeps getting brought up. Got brought up on the interview that I was just brought in to do. It was the first question. Well, I'm like, people love that analogy, but that's what Andrew Vaughn is. Andrew Vaughn's posting thirst traps right now on Instagram after hitting the gym for 3 months, and they're going to prove that you screwed up by letting him go. And you don't want that. It's okay. Move on.
Right. But part of the problem was, let's think back to Andrew Vaughn's arrival. Kenny and Rick are talking about Andrew Vaughn like he's already a Hall of Famer, like he's already an all-star, like he's a guy who is going to put this team over the top because he is so darn talented. And you can't tell me that didn't get in between that guy's ears, right? You can't tell me that Luis Robert Jr. doesn't feel the weight of being anointed a superstar before he's even really a Major League Baseball player, or that Yohan Moncada was not feeling the pressure of being anointed as a superstar before he decided that he wanted to be an international music superstar instead. Or that, the list goes on, okay? We rush guys up from the minors as first-round picks under Kenny and Rick. It's obscene the way that they would sit there, and I had forgotten about the Ken Griffey Jr. in 2005 thing, but the running gag with Kenny was always, let's find a guy who was one of the best players in the league, and when he is on his last legs, let's put him on the south side of Chicago and talk about him like he's still in his prime. Okay, when Ken Griffey Jr. does arrive to the White Sox finally in 2008, the guy has very little left in the tank, okay, to the point where he even has a conversation with Kenny and says, you do understand I can't actually play center field anymore.
I know his goal is to be able to sit there and be able to tell people like that Roberto Alomar Jr. was a White Sox. Like, yeah, but he wasn't a star for the White Sox. You got him at the end. Look at all
the Hall of Famers I got.
Sandy Alomar Jr. at the end. I mean, even in 06, like, look, people love Jim Thome. They do. And you always can tell who's a casual White Sox fan when they'll sit there and say, Jim Thome was great. He helped us win a World Series. And you're like, no, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
He didn't get there till afterwards. And he was so intent on getting Jim Thome in there. But, Frank Thomas did not have a problem coming back and being Frank Thomas. And you did change the makeup of your team just a little bit too much. You did tinker just a little bit too much. There's a reason why you didn't get back with that group. And I felt, and I think most fans felt, like that group should have been back. That group should have been back in 06. And then they don't go back in 06. You do all kinds of weird stuff in 07. And the wheels just fall off. That's on him. He had a nucleus of really good players. And he tinkered too much at it, and he didn't seem to understand his owner. That's the main thing. That's the thing that bothered me the most about Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn, and the thing that I like about Chris Getz. And we've said it here on this show. I mean, we had Scott Merkin talking about some of the aspects of it. He didn't really get into the same feeling that we have, but he did talk about the fact that they're waiting for the number from Jerry, and then he's going to make his plan. Where it always felt like the last regime was like, okay, we're going to come up with a plan, and then we're going to go beg Jerry for the money. And then they would be in shock when he wouldn't come through with it. And then they would shrug and be like, well, we're just doing the best I can. And I love that man. I love Jerry Reinsdorf. I love him. He's a great guy. He's a great man. And if he says we can't do it, then we can't do it. Maybe more fans should show up to the stadium. And then you get insulting things thrown at you from your front office. You notice Chris Getz doesn't do that? You notice Chris Getz never slights the fan base. Chris Getz has never done a podcast, done a broadcast with Chuck Garfien or anything else where he's taken shots at the fan base or talked about the fact that he doesn't look at Twitter, but these people are wrong like Rick Hahn used to do. There is no chip on Chris Getz's shoulder. You know what he knows? He knows the fan base is right, and he knows who his owner is, and he's trying to do the best he can with a plan in which he brought in a bunch of guys from outside the organization because he knew the organization was rotten from the inside while he was in it as at a lower level. And I can only appreciate that. I don't know if he's going to be successful, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, we only have to go back to the fact that Kenny Williams' son was a member of the White Sox front office when his claim to fame outside of that was having a real bad fumbling problem for the San Francisco 49ers. Okay?
Then he was a baseball expert. Suddenly.
And then all of a sudden he's a baseball expert.
In charge with a major impact on your minor league development. And how good were we at that? Like you don't have to go far. You don't have to go far. And the stories that came out afterwards where it sounds like Getz got rid of him and then him and Kenny were angry at each other because of the whole thing. There was a lot of stuff going on in the background in that last season. So look, again, I would love to have Chris Getz on the show. And I would love to candidly speak with him. I don't think that the organization would let me, right?
No.
And I think that if Getz has ever listened to the show before, and I know a lot of people in the front office, I've been told, listen to this show from time to time. And they've paid attention to things that we've said on this show. I think he would know that I would ask him questions like this. And he'd be like, how am I supposed to say my owner sucks? Right?
Well, and he can't. And,
no matter how delicately I tried to put it. Like, you understand the payroll? Like, there's no way I could dance around it without it coming across it like, yeah, I know he's a cheapskate. Right? So he's done a very good job of avoiding that talk, but acting as though he understands it. And that's a good thing because you don't want to be the Tigers with school.
No.
You don't want to be that. Because guess what? They now have to make the choice of, can we get the owner now to kick in some extra money so we can get the payroll up another $50 million and have a $200 million payroll next year and use this last year of Scooble and go for it and push all of our chips in, even though it's going to damage us long term? Or do we now move on from him and be a weaker team? Because you're not going to go find a Scooble at the price that they're willing to pay for starting pitching in free agency. And so that's the paradox they're in right now. And that's the problem with if you're a have or a have not. We're a have not. And at least the GM understands that we're a have not. And he hopes that eventually when the new owner gets in there, we might be a have. Wrapping up the last show of the week, as always, the Sox Nerd, and he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. Lots of Halloween fun, including a jack-o'-lantern world out at the Forge. You can get an entire video preview of it on Lamont Unlocked with yours truly. We checked the entire thing out. Next week, we are ghost hunting on that video podcast. See it and see everything going on in Lamont at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, in the wake of the excellent interview you had with Don Cooper on a recent show, here are a few nuggets on the Coop. Cooper is the longest-serving coach in White Sox history at 20 years, just ahead of fellow pitching coach Ray Barris and Art Kushner, who both worked 19 seasons, Joe Nosick at 16 seasons, and Harold Baines at 12 seasons. Someday I'll do a segment on Barris, whom I knew pretty well, and was one of the most underrated figures in Sox history. Just a gem of a guy, too. Cooper's first taste of big league coaching came for the 1995 Sox. When Terry Bovington took over as manager after Gene Lamont was fired, Cooper served as interim pitching coach from June 2nd to August 11th before Mike Pasick was hired. That 1995 staff was wild and was probably a good primer for Cooper for dealing with all kinds of personalities. In those 70 days he was in charge of Sox pitchers in 1995, Cooper handled the likes of Jim Abbott, Dave Righetti, Rob Dibble, and Atlee Hammaker. Pasick, Cooper's first successor, served as Sox pitching coach until 1998 before Nardi Contreras was hired. Nardi lasted until July 21, 2002, when Cooper came aboard. Cooper was first hired by the Sox as a pitching coach for their Class A South Bend affiliate for the 1988 season. His first staff produced 2 pitchers who made it to the big leagues and one, John Hudek, who was an all-star as a rookie for the 1994 Astros. In 1989, Cooper moved to Class A Sarasota, and one of his pitchers there briefly was Jim Morris, who was the subject of the 2002 Dennis Quaid movie, The Rookie. Cooper's last minor league team stop was at AAA Nashville in 1996, where he was Bobby Thigpen's last pitching coach. Nashville was the final stop of Thigpen's 12-year career. Thiggy later worked with Cooper as Sox bullpen coach from 2013 to 2016. A couple more. Don Cooper was an excellent minor league pitcher. His major league career was brief. His most noteworthy Sox tie came on September 13, 1981, when he was the starting pitcher for Minnesota in the Sox final game at the Met in Bloomington. Just to cement what you and Ed talked about on your follow-up pod to the Cooper interview, it should be pointed out that the White Sox led the American League with 1,461 quality starts under Don Cooper between 2003 and 2020. By the way, Wilbur Wood set a Sox record with 37 quality starts in 1971. The leader in the Cooper era was Esteban Loaiza, who made 27 quality starts in 2003. The Sox all-time leaders here are Ted Lyons at 283, followed by Billy Pierce at 241 and Mark Burley at 231. That's in the live ball era, by the way. In addition to Bevington, Cooper worked under Sox managers Jerry Manuel, Ozzie Guillen, Robin Ventura, and Rick Renteria. Cooper was a manager, albeit briefly. He split 2 games as Sox bench boss in 2011 after Guillen was released from his contract with 2 games left in the season. The starting pitcher in Cooper's first game as Sox coach was Brian Kaiser. The starting pitcher in his last game as Sox coach was Dane Dunning in that ill-fated decisive Game 3 of a 2020 wildcard series. In between, Cooper had a role in developing every pitcher who played with the Sox. And if you consider his time in the minor leagues, Cooper probably worked with almost every pitcher in the Sox organization between 1988 and 2020. And while the Stars and the 4 straight complete games in the 2005 ALCS are the highlights, you can't overlook the arms he resurrected or developed, like Loaiza, like Sergio Santos, like Cliff Polite, like Boone Logan, like Matt Thornton, like Aaron Bummer. Maybe the best part of that interview, though, is the way Cooper reflects upon 2005 with such respect and such reverence. In that regard, he is a Sox fan's everyman. In honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing frequently about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. Cooper's 2005 Sox had 6 pitchers who fashioned quality starts. Garland led with 22, followed by Burley and Garcia at 20 each, Contreras with 18, El Duque with 10, and Brandon McCarthy with 5. That's it, guys. Probably more than you wanted to know about Coop, quality starts, and resurgent arms.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.